Happy International Women's Day, or International Working Women's Day, or International Communist Women's Day, depending on who you ask. But let's take a look at a piece by Clara Zetkin, the German communist, who we can thank for today's celebration. Storms of enthusiasm greeted the motion of our Bulgarian comrades in the resolution of the Second International Conference of Communist Women at Moscow to celebrate Women's Day everywhere on March 8th, the day which previously was observed only by Russian comrades. Hearts beat wildly, eyes had a far-off look, and the will to do dauntlessly rose supreme. The bourgeoisie of all countries has shown during its imperialistic war and in the years that followed that it has neither the capacity nor the will to conduce and manage for the general good of the fabulous forces of production which have been developed under its rule. It can only paralyze them and neglect them through the misery of crises and the crimes of war, and bring them to destruction and ruin. Capitalism cannot, like the traditional phoenix, rise from the flames and ashes of the World War into a new life, rejuvenated. It is weak when it comes to the chain, the chaos that it has unloosed, but it is really powerless to cause a new, higher material and cultural existence. For all blossoms from the ruins. It can still go on in the humdrum way with the result that it will transform a minority of millionaires into billionaires, a satisfied idlers overfed with culture and bread and triflers with scientific, artistic, and social merit into squandering degenerates. The developments towards the abyss cannot be arrested by the meetings of the diplomatic tribe, the politicians, captains of industry, and kings of finance, with their buzzing and whispering, with the false secret treaties and their clenched fists against the working class. They will remain real in spite of the prophecies of those tired and afraid of revolution, who see nothing on the historical horizon but a rebirth of capitalism and its order. Just as nobody can leap over his shadow, capitalism is unable to swing itself over the boundaries of its existence. Its wonderful and well-known adaptability to higher forms of organization has been shattered on its unyielding nature as an individual and anarchistic profit economy. The historical hour of capitalism has passed. It must yield to socialism and communism, the necessary prerequisites for which have been generated within its own breasts. This assurance is not a blissful faith, but an unshakable, scientific, well-grounded knowledge of social facts, associations, and laws of evolution. In the midst of the terrible distress and the bitter struggles of the times, this assurance will give to the International Communist Women's Day an unfailing strength and flaming enthusiasm which will attract and recruit the masses. It will forge the unyielding will of millions to fight and conquer capitalism and to pave the way for communism. For this will, and only this will, can kick into the grave capitalism whose process of decay fills the air with poisonous, putrid bacilli and the nauseating breath of pestilence. Should this active and self-sacrificing will be lacking, then capitalism can vegetate more extensively, although it has been sentenced by history. The price for this will be paid by the exploited and oppressed wage slaves, by the taxed and ruled producing classes outside the ranks of the Junkers, the captains of industry, the rulers of the stock exchange, and their illegitimate but nevertheless natural brothers, the speculators and profiteers. And this price will be recorded in history with blood and tears as a crushing defeat, the destruction and of whole proletarian armies. The communist women were conscious of all this when they adopted their resolution in Moscow for International Women's Day. Today, they are conscious with a greater clarity and a stronger power of resolution of how to prepare for this demonstration. The International Communist Women's Day must also answer the question of destiny, which stands full of responsibility and sacrifice, but nevertheless hopeful and blessed. Before the men and women of the producing classes of all countries, patient, humble satisfaction with dirty, blood-dripping capitalism, or a resolute, inexorable fight for its destruction. The answer to this question must be clear and distinct, without any twistings and turnings, with buts and ifs, and millions of women and men must answer. The liberation of the workers can only be the work of the working class itself. It can never accomplish this gigantic and terrible work of history. However, if it is torn in two halves by the sex distinction. As the men and women of the proletariat are united body and soul in their crushing life of misery, so must they also unite a burning hatred of capitalism with a more confident, more daring will to fight for the revolution. The International Communist Women's Day must not remain only a women's demonstration in any country or town. It must everywhere be the expression of the will and the work of the entire Communist Party. The latter must support our Women's Day with all its physical and moral strength. The power, the character, the tenor, the goal of our Women's Day should make the necessity for it as apparent and self-evident as the existence of every party of the Third International. Dare we forget that we are communists? Communism binds. Our place is in the struggle with the capitalistic monster, in the work and the fight for the far-off, sunshine-filled edifice of communism, in which everybody will find a home of the greatest humanity. Men as well as women, just as in the fight for complete humanity, we must fight for the things concerning men as well as those concerning women. Before our thoughts and wills stand a great gathering of millions of all the exploited, the enslaved, the suffering and oppressed, and the one great sublime common cause which calls to the fight. Here, the proletariat longing for a fuller life. There, the bourgeoisie yearning for gold and power. Here, socialism. Communism developing people as the creators and enjoyers of culture into perfect, happy human beings. There, capitalism uses people as the material for profits, besmirches them, lowers their standard of living, cripples them, and grinds them down. With this conviction, the International Women's Day is to win the broad masses for the fight and the cause of communism, men and women without distinction. The memory of the glorious deed of the Petrograd working women on March 8th shall wave over our Women's Day like a blazing banner which points out the way and kindles our courage. Moreover, as a recruiting force for the Communist Party for the Third International, the demonstration will continue during the work of March 5th through the 12th, for it is to carry the spark of thought by which the act of emancipation is kindled into the depths and the remotest little corner inhabited by people whose humanity is ground by capitalism in its profit mill.